Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to work on an oldie but a goodie. This one is a Quantum EX 200 2-ball bearing low profile bait caster, and it's co-branded with Zebco, and Zebco owns Quantum, or did own Quantum. Now all of them are by a Rafter Enterprises, as that group got sold off, but regardless, it's a Quantum reel, and Quantum joined this other organization, Rafter, and it's the home of Lew's fishing reels, and I think Lew's is probably getting the upper side now of the marketing in terms of the higher end, and Quantum is being relegated to the introduction stuff, but that's not this one. So this reel is a 2-ball bearing reel. It has a continuous anti-reverse, which means the automatic clutch. And we're going to take this apart. We'll show you how it's made. We'll service it. We'll put it back together again. And we'll take some notes along the way. I like to get started by removing the pieces and parts. As I do, I'd like to thank all of the folks keeping us safe during the pandemic. That includes all the healthcare workers, regardless of role and where you are in the lineup. All of our uniformed services, police, fire, and rescue, and everybody else. And of course, the essential personnel that are involved in delivering the goods and services to keep us, try to keep us as close to normal as possible. There's 3 case screws here. One of these case screws, I believe, is going to hold the other side plate. You can see we're down to a ball bearing here. There was 2 small tension washers, and I put those into the cup, and I put all of my pieces and parts into a parts tray. So we're going to just get these screws loose, and you can usually walk them out with your hands the way that these knobs are set after the screw comes loose. And I think we're also going to have to take the 2 screws here that are bridge plates before I can get that side off. I'm believing that this screw that goes through is the magic hold down for the side plate here. And we should be able to turn that side plate one way or another. Oh, I guess we have a second one going through. Maybe, yeah, we have them all coming through. So this might just pull right off. Yep, just pulls right off. Okay, so no twists, no turns. There's some kind of stuff on here. I'm not quite sure what that is. Looks like it might even be a little bit of dirt. Not quite sure what happened here. Some kind of corrosion, perhaps. The magnets are still very strong. I'm feeling those, but those magnets will roll on here. It's a magnetic brake, and with magnets, I'm always uncertain about what you want to do with those magnets. Generally speaking, you don't want to do much at all. Okay, I want to pull this spool out now. I don't have the schematic diagram for this, but there's a bearing back here, so you certainly want to service that bearing. There's 2 ball bearings, so there's one on that side for the spool, and there's one on this side for the shaft. So you want to get here. I also removed the spool because when I don't have a schematic, sometimes manufacturers will put screws here. They'll hide the screw, and you won't be able to remove that side plate without that screw coming off. So we'll take care on that one. And now we'll take these 2 pieces off for the bridge plate. Those are Phillips head screws. Just going to move those over to the side. I'm going to go ahead and take the first one off. Make sure that you match the head of your screwdriver to the slots in the screw. Don't try to use something that's too small or too big. You can wear those slots out pretty easily on a lot of these screws, and if you do, you're in trouble in terms of removing that screw, potentially breaking it off or butterflying it, where you spread the gap and you can't get it out. So take care and caution when you do that. All right, so we have these 3 screws that I imagine are going to pull out with the side plate. We have the 2 off the bridge. This whole thing should walk up now, just like that. And just check underneath. You want to make sure it's clean. In this case, it's very clean. Even the anti-reverse bushing in there is clean. There's nothing to do there. So here's the makeups of this reel. We have a yoke that comes on here. We have a yoke, 2 springs. We have the pinion gear, the main gear, drag washer behind it, drive for the line guide. Before I go any further on these reels, I like to do 2 things. The first is get rid of these springs, put them right into my parts tray, because they have a tendency, no matter what you're doing on a reel, they have a tendency to shoot. So if you can take care to remove those springs right away, you're usually in a better position. The next thing I like to do with this reel is to take a picture so that you have the orientation. Now, it may be pretty obvious to a lot of us, yeah, I got this big gear and this little gear, but you know, there's springs here, there's a spring in here, there's a orientation on this free spool release. You want to check your clutch underneath, make sure that you can take a picture there. That way, if the reel fails, if you've taken apart something that you can't remember how to do it, well, if you take that picture, it's going to be able to guide you back to safety, if you will. It's your little safety net there. I just removed the gear collar, the main gear. Now I want to take the pinion gear and the yoke off, and I want to take the plastic off. Here's a good example. This plastic has 2 studs on the upside and not on the bottom side, so you know that faces up. Chances are there's corresponding holes. There are under the main gear here, and that's where you want to leave that. And then we have a click ratchet, and I'm coming down here because, well, underneath here there's only a bushing, so you don't need to take this off at this point. We know where the 2 ball bearings are on this reel. If it said 3 ball bearings, the other one would be under the gear shaft here. But it doesn't hurt to take the whole reel apart. You're spending the time and the energy. You might as well do it all. So we're going to take those 2 off just to show you. We'll put a dab of grease underneath there when we get done. Now the parts on the table here, I haven't put those into my tray because I expect to put those right back on. So I'm just going to be careful as I do this, because I don't want to inadvertently knock them off the bench by just pulling something and tapping them off and then searching for them later. Those 2 screws out, you should be able to remove this. I said bushing, we don't have anything, we just have a plastic case under there. So I'm going to wipe this down. And depending on the reel that you're working on, some of those will put a bushing, some will put a bearing in there. It's good to know that it's there, and you would want to do your best to work underneath there. That will facilitate the turning of this gear. Doesn't hurt to put a drop of oil in here. This is a good time to say, if you like this kind of hobby, if you'd like to learn more, if you're interested in the art of reel repair, then subscribe to my channel. And if you subscribe to my channel, you'll see everything that I post by hitting the notification button. Those notifications will tell you what reels I'm working on. I work on all kinds. In this case, we're just doing a classic bait casting reel, but you can also see me do the saltwater reels, freshwater reels, spinning, trolling, open face, line guide, all kinds of reels. Whatever comes into my shop, you're essentially looking over my shoulder as I work on the day's projects. So if you like that, hit the notification button after subscribing, and that's going to give you the heads up as to which ones are out there. Okay, I'm going to put a drop of oil onto the bearing from both sides, just so that it's kind of soak in there. You can test that bearing. Use a screwdriver or something, grab the inside, make sure you see that it's turning easily. This one is doing fine, thank you very much. All right, we can go back now and we can grab this side. There's a little bit of old grease, not much, on that jack. You do not need to disassemble this jack assembly unless you saw something that wasn't working. Maybe your reel wasn't returning, maybe it wasn't firing properly. In that case, go ahead and take this apart, but you don't have to. And what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of hitting the pivot points, and with those pivot points I want to make sure that it just has a little bit of lubrication underneath. If you took your picture, you remember that this click ratchet goes next, just like that. And you can see how it fits in there. So this is going to fire the return. If you turn your piece now, watch what happens here. it's going to push it up, and that's going to push your button back up into the cast position. Okay. So we're going to continue with this then. I'm just going to put a little bit more oil in here. Going to grab our washer next. And then we know this nests into the back of your main gear. I'm going to clean a little bit of that off. And do a check on the washer. The washer looks fine. That's why you want to put a lot of these things into your case. Yeah, this washer is fine. It's a hard composite. You don't need to do anything other than making sure that it's clean. You do not need to grease composite washers. Okay, I'm going to take the back end of this gear. We're going to set those two prongs in. And this is always good to do before you put it back on. You can play hide and seek for a while, try to do it, but in most cases, if you put it on first, it's going to be a whole lot easier to put back on. Make sure that it meshes with your line guide, and then we can go grab that cap. And I'm just wondering right now if I have to put this in first. We'll see in a sequence. All right, on this, let's say you took that gear out and you went for coffee or something, and you got confused and you don't remember which way it goes. There's a ramp on the back of these yokes. Those ramps are going to get pushed up by the bumps on the jack here, so that faces inward. Also facing inward is the slot on that pinion gear, so you want to make sure that you have that orientation right when you go to put this in. A little bit of grease into the collar. You want to set it so that the piece that accepts the spool is along with those ramps, and we want to put some grease onto the pinion gear. We should be able to slide that in open side down next. I must put that on backwards. There we go. And then you want to get grease onto the teeth of the main gear. This main gear is very clean. It doesn't appear as though it's been used. The whole reel is very clean. We saw some grease on the cap, but not much. So I would say that probably, more likely than not, what's happened here is that the grease has evaporated. All right, that's on. Next up then, we're going to put the two springs onto the yoke. And this is always best done in the off position for your gears so that you get the maximum coverage on those springs. We're going to put that cap on after we clean that, a little post cap, and then the cover can go back on. Now if you had a dirty anti-reverse, if it wasn't working, then what you would do is just come in here, clean that out. I just poked the bearing out, that's okay. Clean it out, and then I'm going to put the bearing back on. I'm also going to give that bearing a drink of oil before I put it back on. You do not oil that anti-reverse clutch. That's a friction-driven clutch, and if you put oil on it, you actually defeat the purpose. You remove the friction, and it just doesn't work very well. Before I go any further there, as long as I have that open, I'm going to take a little rod and reel cleaner. I'm going to use that on the case here to get rid of some of that old film and dust from sitting around for a while. And then we'll go reinstall this. I'm going to keep that right here because there's more to go. When you go to put this back on, find your 3 slots. 1, 2, 3. Line that up as you come across. Line the holes up, slide the case over. In case I push that bearing out again. And you don't have to tighten these up at the moment, but you do need to put those 2 screws in to hold that down. So let's go do that right now. Then we'll take a look. We have the spool. We have a little bit of line on that spool. We'll take that out. We also want to service the pawl. So So we can get that ahead of finishing up the reel here. I'm undecided what to do with that rust there. I don't think there's much I can do with anything there. And I'm pretty certain I don't want to disturb the magnets, so I think it just may wind up that we leave them there. All right, and then I have that one little washer that goes on the top of the bearing here so that it doesn't get interfered with the drag tie down. All right, I'm going to come over here now. We'll service the pawl. Again, find the appropriate tool for the sleeve. I'm going to remove the cap. And then if you tap down, you can generally move the pawl out. The pawl is a cylinder. You want to make sure that it is nice and round and that the teeth are even. You also want to make sure that there is no debris on the shoulder here. That's where the flat section of the pawl meets that fork. Sometimes old greases will accumulate in there, and when they accumulate in there, they dry, and then they start to choke off the performance of the reel. All right, so reseat that. A little bit of cleaning going on here. So this one says that this reel was made in Korea. So there's a couple of things when you look at bait casters, you can kind of judge age. One of them is the actual body style. They've changed over times to really sleek looking ones from very rather bulky ones. And you can also tell by where they're made. Most of the stuff today is made in China, so if it was made in Korea, it was pre-China. China seemed to take off in the early 2000s. A lot of companies moved their production over there. And if you find them made in China, it's later versus Korea. Some of them have never moved it to China, so that's not a good clue for you on that, but some of them have, and those generally started in the early 2000s. All right, I'm just going to use this mop here to use that rod and reel cleaner on the rest of these parts. I have a line here that I noted that was snapped off. I'm just going to press down with a utility knife to kind of cut through without scarring that. We'll do the same thing here that we just did with the other one. Clean it up nicely. Pretty reel. Nice for its time. I'm sure that this reel was probably a mid-priced reel. It's got a 5-to-1 retrieve. It's got a nice case, good form factor, solid design, and good materials inside. So it was not an inexpensive reel. And get the grease on the back here. Go ahead and put that back in. While I have this, I'm going to oil that worm drive. I don't put grease on worm drives. And for this, I just don't know. I am still a little bit confused here, so I'm just going to use a WD-40, which is a rust preventer, if you will. I'm just going to plot that off. I'm just going to go with that. It seems to have cleared a lot of that. But I suspect what happened here was we had some saltwater intrusion in this case, and that's probably what caused some of those steel magnets to rust up. But that did a pretty good job. It seems to have gotten most of that away. All right, let's go put this back on. We noted that you don't snap on with this. It just simply goes straight in. So line that up so that the case lines up. Just like that. When you hear that nice little snap there, you know you've got it. Take the screws and hand tighten them down as much as we can. So I mentioned if you have questions on fishing reels, this one or any other reel for that matter, leave them in the comments section. I'll be happy to try and answer those. Also, if you have a reel that needs service and you don't want to do it yourself, well, if you contact me, I'll be happy to provide you with the repair information and where to send those reels. Okay, we're good, good and good. This is where pictures help tell you what goes where if you weren't paying attention. We have these two concave washers. They're not flat washers. When I come up on a situation where I have a bearing, I like to put the first one with the cup facing towards you. And then you have a lot of options. You can nest them by putting the two cups together. You can go face to face with them. And they're all about just giving you some some flexibility on the star adjuster wheel. All right, that goes in next. Once you clear that, you can come on and use your handle as a wrench to hold that post while you continue to tighten down that drag. But don't tighten your handle up yet. If you look in your parts tray, you know that you have that little tension washer that goes on top. That's to prevent you from backing the star adjuster up and locking it in on the handle. Then we have the nut. We're almost ready for a test drive here. One more piece of cleaning. We want to clean that other side as well. But we're getting pretty much close to the end of doing this one. So if you line up the point on the nut with that nut hole, you can generally, or screw hole, you can generally get that cover to lock in. Also, if you line it up flat, perpendicular to it, it generally works, and it's worked in this case. You can look through and see that that nut is lined up there. Put that tie down in, and then we'll give it a try here. Nice reel, well made, probably priced right. And the last thing we want to do before we go anywhere else is put a drop of oil in each of the handles. That'll work its way in. And then I want to grab that kitchen scrubby that I have with the rod and reel cleaner on it. Just clean that and then use the paper towel for the final polishing. That rod and reel cleaner is a polish and a cleaner, so it's kind of a two-in-one thing. Give it a ride. Boy, that's nice and smooth. And then if we push in, we should have a spin here. We do. We have an adjuster here. This probably is pretty much okay. But you want to just use that as your adjuster for your cast, your spool tension. And last testing, of course, is does it come back? It does. So there you go. That's the Quantum EX 200 two-ball bearing reel. Looking a lot better than when we started. In nice condition and ready to go fishing again. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did, please like it. To everybody, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.